What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 433 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher here with Drew Dinkmeyer as we are wrapping up one of the toughest months of the NBA season in January. November, January, March, always the three toughest calendar months in the NBA season. So we're going to take a big picture and zoom out approach here and talk about the state of the NBA. We saw Adam Silva doing some rounds talking about where the NBA is at. We'll talk about tanking. Should be pretty fun. We have a lot of thoughts. We go through this every day, especially during the season. Even in the off season, we have thoughts. But with me to do so again, Drew Dinkmeyer. Dink, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, we've been zooming in a little bit of late, talking about, Eastern Conference title contenders, Western Conference title contenders, the play-in chase in the Western Conference. And so I want to take just one episode to sort of zoom out, especially since Adam Silver has been making the rounds. He did an interview a few weeks back on Colin Cowherd talking about kind of the state of the game, addressing concerns over, the three-point shot dominating the game. And then just recently has done some interviews where he's even been asked the question about what the most radical idea that they've entertained in terms of adjusting the game is, introducing 10-minute quarters and being more consistent with international basketball. And it just spurred the idea of what do we think are the real issues with the game that can be improved? Mike and I specifically try to spend much of our content that we provide hyping up the game because it's a game we love. We feel like we love the benefits of the game. We think the game is in a great place naturally. So it's not like we feel forced to hype it. It's just we think this is the best way to cover the game. But there are times when I think it's good to look inward at what the game could do better. And especially after this month of basketball in January, where eyes in the sports world start to turn their attention from football to basketball, either at the collegiate or the professional level, as we get into March Madness, as we get into the playoffs in the NBA. I felt like the last few weeks of basketball has really left a lot on the table in terms of the quality of basketball that's being put out at a time when eyes are starting to get on the game a little bit more. And there's some things that I think are more of an issue to the game in terms of the schedule and tanking than some of the things that are being floated around. So I wanted to take the opportunity to talk through this today.
For sure. So let's talk about how Adam Silver feels about the league and really the big thing that came up, and even coaches are getting asked about it. Joe Mazzulla got asked about it in his presser with the 10-minute quarters. And I heard the question asked really fast, and I was like, I know what Mazzulla was going to say. He said, I don't care. And then that was the end of the question. Anyways, not the right person to ask that question to. But I digress. So 10-minute quarters, obviously, that Silver kind of laid it out as a 2-hour thing. NBA games almost never take 2.5 hours even because they don't start on time, all that stuff. So just thoughts on 10-minute quarters and, what that might mean for the NBA, and do you like it?
So I think on the positive front, what Silver was trying to address was our shortening attention spans, how in general, trying to shorten the length of games, the success that baseball has had trying to shorten the length of games in terms of what that does for the TV audience. He specifically said, the in-person audience isn't asking for games to be shorter in any way, shape, or form, but the way that people consume television these days are interested in being shorter. That obviously would solve that problem, just playing 8 minutes less of basketball. But I think there are other ways to solve that problem as well. And so if the ultimate problem is simply trying to address fitting into a tighter TV window, I think there's ways you can do that. Start the games on time. They all start 10 minutes late, 10 minutes later than their scheduled time. Just start them on time. That'll save you 10 minutes right there. We can cut off another 3 to 5 minutes by doing some simple things like cutting replay review time. Replay review time should have a maximum amount of time that it's on, and if they can't come to a decision, call on the floor stands essentially. You can have replay assist overturned immediately. We've seen this come through in football where they have certain plays that are immediately replay assisted, overturned. There's no actual stoppage in play. Stuff like that can be very, very helpful to be able to influence the game. I think they could narrow the number of timeouts. Right now, teams get 7 timeouts. You can use no more than 4 in the fourth quarter. Cut down a timeout or 2. We don't need all these timeouts. We already have TV timeouts baked in, and we have plenty of situations where teams are actually losing a timeout that they don't even use just because we have TV timeouts that gets charged to the home team in those instances. So just cut down the number of timeouts. There's G League has been experimenting with the free throw rule, right? Where the number of if you get fouled and you get fouled on a 2-point shot, you shoot 1 free throw for 2 points. It's 0 points or 2 points. If you get fouled on a 3-point shot, 1 free throw for 3 points or 0 points. That can speed up the game. They don't do that in the last 4 minutes of the game, which I think is fine too. But there's lots of different ways within the existing game that you can speed up the game. And what Silver tried to address in that concern was records, was that there's a concern for the history of the game and maintaining records and different things like that, which I thought was interesting because the construct of records in the NBA is built off of per game statistics. We consider all of the records off of per game statistics. And so if we adjusted the minutes per game that people were playing, we'd be concerned for the records. But you know what wouldn't impact the records, Mike? Because they're per game statistics, the number of games that we play.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where like a lot of this stuff gets very frustrating to me, because I think the simple answer to a lot of the questions that the league has is let's play fewer games. We've expanded the number of games in the playoffs. We've expanded the number of the rounds in the playoffs, going from best of 5 to best of 7 throughout.
Mm-hmm.
We've added more playoff games. That's great. That's great for TV and for money and all those different things. We love playoff basketball. Let's take away some of the regular season games. Like very, very kind of simple math here. If you have a concern that the bulk of your players aren't playing in games, which we know Adam Silver has addressed before, because we have a new rule about a 65 game minimum requirement to qualify for awards. We have rules about national TV and not being able to rest players on that. Let's just play less games. We play less games, players will be available for a higher percentage of those games. And I think that's where most of the conversation and most of the real challenges around the league are right now, is simply that people that want to go to the games don't know who's going to play on a given night. And if we can get to a point where we can have a more concrete understanding of who's going to play on a night, the consumer doesn't feel like they got something taken away from them when they purchase a ticket, when they sit down to watch a game, so on and so forth. And I think that's the feeling we need to combat. Obviously, that means everybody's got to take a little bit less money because there's fewer games going on. And the reason that I think we're getting floated the shorter the shorter period on games in 40 minutes instead of 48 minutes is because they don't want to screw around with the TV contracts and the number of games, and the players aren't going to want to vote for that as well. But ultimately, in terms of the long-term narratives and trying to combat them, I think that's what this keeps coming back to. So like for me, I think there's benefits to the idea of tightening the TV window. I don't think it needs to be done through a 40-minute game instead of a 48-minute game. And then I also think a 40-minute game would lead to just a higher percentage of the game being played by the starters, which people will like, but that is not great for the long-term kind of growth of the league in terms of getting younger players the ability to get on the floor. That makes it a smaller league necessarily. And so I think your reserve players, you'd have a bigger gap between the haves and have-nots. You'd have fewer paths or tougher paths for players to develop because they're not getting on-court in-game minutes as much in second units. And so, like, would those players have to go down to the G League to develop more? Would we not be seeing Amen Thompsons take the same growth that we've seen during the course of this season because there's not enough minutes in the regular season games to kind of get there? And there's not enough practice time to get there because the games are too condensed. So those would be some of my concerns around the idea of going from 48 to 40. I think the intention of trying to shorten the broadcasting window makes sense, but I think there's other ways that can be accomplished.
Yeah, obviously agree with everything. I think number one, the reviews, man. I mean, how many times have you been, at the end of a game, I can't remember how many times, I'll say to my girlfriend, like, hey, I'll make dinner and let me finish this game up. And it's like a minute 20 left, and like 10 minutes later, they're reviewing again, and I'm still waiting for the damn game to end. So, like, that's that. They got to fix that. And I mean, come on, how many times you watch a review and you watch it in 2 seconds? Okay, he's out of bounds, and like they're still there. Like, come on, that's number one. Number two, yeah, I mean, like, I don't really care about the game on time thing. Like, I don't care because I just know, and I even know, oh, it's a TNT game, they're going to start earlier. Oh, it's ESPN game, they're going to start 15 minutes after. But like, people don't know that. People don't live it and know that. But yeah, like, the other stuff's cool. I think that makes sense. But really, cutting down the reviews, I think cutting down timeouts makes sense. You don't need timeouts that much. Think about Michael Malone, that called timeout. They had 11:30 left. He had no timeouts, and hey, they won the game. So I think those are kind of the two easy ones. Like the whole TV timeout thing, and like have to use it or lose it timeouts. That never made any sense to me. Obviously, I get it, but like, what are we doing here? Like don't even use them. That was weird. But so I'm kind of like going out of order here. So when you're talking about bad basketball being played now, and this is a little bit early, we'll talk about that.
Yep.
To me, what was the best basketball we've seen so far? The NBA Cup, right? We loved it. Why wouldn't you just put the NBA Cup in January when like more eyeballs are? That's like the easy one to me. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think it would be they're trying to compete with, the NBA starts before Christmas narrative.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to compete with that. But if you look at kind of the decision in a holistic approach to the season in terms of what they're sacrificing, they're trying to get a little bit of attention on the NBA when college football and NFL are kind of dominating the attention. And in some cases, like playoff baseball, even in October, they're trying to set the stage for the Emirates Cup in that period and compete with eyeballs then. Mm-hmm. Then in January, they're giving this really condensed part of the schedule where, yes, they have more national TV games opening up because of weekend games and different things like that. But it's a really condensed portion of the schedule where you look through the league in January and every team has like a 5 games and 7 night stretch, a 6 games and 9 night stretch. And because they're playing so condensed there, I think the quality of basketball dips off. You get players that are more rested, injured, so on and so forth. Why would you not have that more condensed period at the very beginning of the season when guys are coming off kind of a more substantial break? Perhaps it's because of a concern of like soft tissue injuries and different things like that, easing guys into the season. I don't know. There might be medical reasons for that. But why would you choose that instead of like highlighting the strength of the game now? What we're going to have here after the Super Bowl is we're going right into the All-Star break. Mm-hmm. For the weekend that everybody around the league has said, like, we got to fix this. We don't know, like NBA All-Star break. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to get the guys to play and be super competitive. We don't know how to get the stars to compete in the slam dunk contest. But hey, right after the Super Bowl, the first weekend of sports, when all eyes are switching attention to us, we're going to put that front and center. Put some of your best product at the point where it has the most demand. And I think that's one of the scheduling challenges. I love the innovation of adding the NBA in-season tournament and the Emirates Cup to the schedule. I don't know that it makes sense where it's placed currently. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the reason we get the best games during that span is because there's days off. There's more days off around that span. There's fewer games overall. And we don't have teams playing 5 games in 7 nights. We have a number of instances over the last week or two. Like Cleveland is a national TV game tonight. We're recording this on January 30th. This is their 5th game in 7 nights. Boston was going into the Lakers. Boston Lakers is the storied rivalry of this league. Mm-hmm. Boston plays in LA against the Lakers once all year long. Mm-hmm. They did it on a 5th game in 7 nights. That's not your best product forward. That's not putting your best foot forward to an audience that is ready to start transitioning from football to NBA. So it's very frustrating for me in terms of the things that Adam Silver seems to be giving attention to in terms of ways to make adjustments to improve the game are things that I don't think really are the core root of what people are not enjoying about the game. I think they are symptoms of other core problems that people are not enjoying about the game.
Mm-hmm. And then to that point, I joke about it, like Rivals Week, like who cares? Like what the messaging of it was like so bad. And then just one other point too with the 3-point line stuff. I'm sure you and I agree that like people are like, oh, it's too much 3-point shooting. No, it's not. Like 3-point shooting is fun, and everyone I know that
loves Steph Curry.
That's what I was gonna say. Bob Myers nailed it last night. He was talking about Steph Curry and Team USA and Steph Curry having that crazy fourth. He said, everyone who watched that game remember where they were. I said, yep. I was watching the game with my girlfriend and said, yep, we remember we were. Yep, you remember you were. I mean, nothing beats hot 3-point shooters, man. Like dunks were cool. Shout out Gary Payton for the facial on Hartenstein last night. But yeah, hot 3-point shooting is the best, man. I mean, Ray Allen threes, all. I mean,
it's also like look at the explosion of the WNBA recently, and a lot of it is getting attributed to one player in particular, Caitlin Clark. Now, if it's not because of Caitlin Clark's ability to stretch the floor and shoot the ball from distance that is drawing the attention, I don't know what else is, right? Mm-hmm. You can get into like racial dynamics and profiles that are maybe driving things there. But generally, I think her game speaks for itself in a way that is very entertaining, right? And so people like 3-point shooting. What people don't like is when they perceive that's the only way that teams are trying to score. And what they see is these clips of some exhausted basketball that teams are just going up and down, rebound, no passes, shoot a 3. Rebound, no passes, shoot 3. That very rarely happens in the NBA. When it does happen, it's generally on situations where teams are in the depths of brutal schedules and guys just don't have the legs to keep driving to the basket over and over again. I think what a lot of people don't understand is today's modern NBA player runs so much more than generations of the past, because even in the fastest paced generations, the 80s of basketball, which played at paces that were faster than what we're seeing now, it was straight line running, kind of up and down. Now it's straight line running up and down, but when you get into any set, there's so much more movement around the floor and there's so much more space to cover on the floor because of shooting. Shooting has gotten so good around the league that you have to cover more inches on the court than you ever had to cover before. You didn't have to go to 27 feet to cover somebody before because they couldn't shoot from there. Now you have to. So you're covering more of the floor each time, and pace has increased from the 90s and early 2000s. So guys are running more and exerting themselves more than they ever have before on a per game basis. We have data to look at this. And so what people don't understand is that there is being more asked of the body on a per game basis for these players because of the growth in the game in terms of how much more floor you have to cover because of the skill of offenses. And so that, in addition to games getting expanded in terms of total number of games, mostly based on the playoffs is where we've expanded games. We haven't gone from 82 in a while. But it's led to, and then more like international basketball, NBA players playing in international basketball and different things like that. It's led to more fatigue over the course of time. And then teams being more aware of managing fatigue has led to more rest. And so the ways to potentially curb this issue of the lazy three-point shooting, more rested teams. When you see teams in the playoffs, when you see teams in the NBA Cup, when you see teams that have had a number of days off, watch how they play. They're trying to get to the rim. They want to get to the rim because that's where the easiest points are. And most three-pointers are created by getting to the rim. The three-pointers people don't like are the ones where there's no one trying to get to the rim. People are just kind of walking into threes. Nobody's that interested in that. But when there's a lot of movement and motion that's happening and ball movement that's happening to get a three, people love that. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful game. We get a lot of that when teams are more rested. And so I think, again, when people are like, oh, we don't want so many three-pointers, I don't think that's true, because people love Steph Curry. People love Caitlin Clark. They don't want bad three-point shooters. We're largely eliminating that from the league. Most of the guys on the floor now can shoot the ball pretty well, and they don't want lazy three-point attempts. The lazy three-point attempts, there's going to be some of them in every game, but they're coming more in games where teams are stretched from a schedule perspective in terms of where they feel like they don't have their legs. And so I think all of this can be helped by playing a 72 game schedule. If we chopped off 10 games, chopped off 2 games a month for all these teams, spread out the games a little bit more. If you don't want to play a 72 game schedule, fine. You want to play 82 games, lengthen the season out. We need a longer season. We need another month of basketball. People don't want that because they don't want the NBA finals to happen in July, because that's when people travel the most for their summer vacations. So they're trying to get it in June. Okay, you don't want that, start earlier. There's all these different ways that you could potentially do things. But I think the emphasis on trying to fix all these symptoms, it's very American to put a Band-Aid on a symptom instead of try to find the root cause of what the issue is. But I think some of these symptoms are not going to be long-term fixed until you understand how to manage the number of games that these players are playing, or the time off in between games that these players are playing. And ultimately, I think that's what all the teams' data has said. That's why you're seeing teams rest players when they have 5 games in 7 days, when they have 6 games in 9 days. That's why you're seeing back-to-backs be more of an issue. That's why they killed the 4 games in 5 nights stuff. Yep. They know that the data shows you need to manage the rest on these players to keep them healthy. And so instead of all these little fixes that we're trying to do, like, oh, you got to play 65 games to get your awards, like make sure you're playing in those games, that hasn't really helped things substantially. And it's just going to make it so that the awards are won by like who's left in a game of attrition, instead of necessarily like celebrating excellence. And so I just think they're going about it a lot in kind of the wrong ways, at least the way that they're talking about trying to fix these things, as opposed to looking at kind of the bigger picture problem, which is we have too condensed a schedule. The time that we're playing the too condensed schedule also happens to coincide with when more eyeballs are going to be on the NBA. That draws more negative attention to the game. And then there's just a bias in terms of the way the game is covered. I know Adam Silver talked about this as well, where some of the other sports do not get covered in the same way that the NBA does. And I think that's true. but it doesn't matter. It's going to get covered the way that it's going to get covered.
Yep. That was well said. I don't have much to add except for the 65 game thing. It took one season for like people to figure out how to get around that. Example,
Yep.
Tyrese Halliburton. We saw Tyrese Halliburton hurt his hamstring. He's going to miss time. They're, oh no, get me out there. Let me play, X amount of games. Get me to 65. We saw him play 20 minutes exactly, which was the number you needed, and pull him out. So yeah, it's like you said, they're just trying to figure out ways to help, and it's helping, I guess. Kawhi was playing more last year. I think it's generally gone in the right direction, but clearly there's just too much basketball right now.
Yep.
Which to transition, there's too much basketball for the Jazz and the Hawks apparently.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of the injury news is insane. We do a show every Monday through Friday talking about the injury report, and it takes an hour. Like almost every time there's like 8 or 9 games on the slate because it's getting a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, so we're shifting gears a little bit to tanking. This is bad, man. It's not even February yet. We're so used to calling it silly season, like after St. Patrick's Day.
Yep.
Like it's not even close to Valentine's Day yet, and we're already dealing with this here. So this is a problem. You and I, me especially, I like lean into it. I love this stuff. This is like too much for me. I can't believe that teams are taking this far, and the Jazz still haven't been fined yet for rest. It literally said DNP rest for Colin Sexton and other guys, non-back-to-backs. Like, how are they not fined yet? And just overall thoughts on just where this is going. We'll talk about like how they can maybe fix it. But this is way too much.
Yeah. So I think if you take again the problem that we were trying to solve with the idea of rest is that fans don't get to see the players they want to see as often as they'd like to see them, and they don't know if they're going to buy a ticket in advance if they're going to get the players that they want to see there. That's the general. That's the problem. That's the crux of the problem that the NBA is dealing with. Mm-hmm. And we talk about this a lot in the context of star players in terms of rest. But I want to talk about this in the context of young players on non-contending teams that fan bases can start to build an affinity for and in a love for these young players. Like if I was a Utah Jazz fan right now, I would rather be getting excited about continuing to see the development of Walker Kessler out on the floor, playing good basketball with Larry Markkinen, and seeing Keontae George and Colin Sexton and some of these younger players like all work together. Instead, I am incentivized to want our best players to not play the games because I want to root for us to get a better draft pick, to get a shot at a better play. That is an insane position to put the fans of your league in. And that's where we're at right now. Like you follow the fan bases for the Brooklyn Nets, for the Utah Jazz. They are happy when their best players are not playing games right now. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for the product in terms of trying to grow the game. And we talk about how the media entities in the game have often sort of held too much and shined too much of a light on the aging stars. And we haven't elevated some of the young talent in the league to be like, this is the next generation of stars. We're still showing every Lakers game we can on national TV because LeBron is such a draw. We're still showing every Warriors game we can because Steph is such a draw. We're not highlighting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, so on and so forth. They have to earn their way through with wins. Well, part of that is you can't put these teams on that potentially are tanking so that we're out here watching Oscar Tshiebwe and Johnny Juzang light it up when people are like, who the heck are these guys? I don't even know these guys weren't even like great college players. I have no connection with them whatsoever, right? We can't market those players, and we can't market them because we can't put these teams on primetime and grow the game in a way that the smaller market fan bases or the losing teams in these cities feel like, oh, I'm going to get to watch my team on national TV tonight. They can't put them on national TV because you don't know if they're going to play their best guys. Yep. You don't know if they're going to play their best guys because they're incentivized not to. And so the tanking thing, which they tried to improve a few years ago by flattening the lottery odds, has not worked. It has not worked. Yep. We are still seeing teams egregiously rest players. The Utah Jazz are the most aggressive. They are doing stuff that is way worse than Sam Hinkie ever did in Philadelphia in terms of we have talented NBA players that we are not letting play the floor against other weaker teams, and we're only going to play them against really good teams that we know we probably won't win that game anyway. Sam Hinkie was at least like, oh yeah, you guys all take the good players in the NBA.
Yep.
You can still see them. You just won't see them on my team because that's how we're going to tank. That's better. That's better for the league.
Yep.
Better for the league than a guy who's hoarding good young players and they won't play them because we need to incentivize the ability to lose and get to the top of the draft. And so I think they know that this is an issue. They tried to address it in recent years by flattening the lottery odds. I don't think they did enough. I think we need to have fully flat odds, or we need to go to the wheel idea that's been floated before. In terms of the wheel idea, means that everybody's draft position is preset for every year and it rotates around a wheel. So within a 30-year period, you would get every pick 1 through 30 at a different year. It's just predetermined. I think that would be interesting in terms of how teams would try to approach it and try to plan for years ahead, knowing that they have a number one pick in certain years. It might get weird with NIL now, where guys might be like, oh, I know the Lakers have the number one pick next year. I'm going to stay in college an extra year. You might get some weird stuff with that. Or if you don't want to do the wheel, if it's too weird for people, just flatten the lottery odds. I don't want a game between Charlotte and Brooklyn to be a battle between how many of their guys can sit out. I'd like to see LaMelo Ball. I'd like to see Cam Thomas. I'd like to see the young players of this game continue to grow with their fan bases so that fans can get excited about watching those guys grow up and become legitimate star NBA players.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like we said with the Sixers, I mean, also shout out Hinkie. I mean, Jeremy Grant was on that team. Robert Covington was on that team. Like, players who kind of developed into pretty solid players. TJ McConnell, shout out TJ. But yeah, you knew, and I wrote road words for almost every 76ers tank game. And like, I knew what I was getting every night. Like, I even knew every time I was going to write a Sixers game, I knew who I was going to write about. I knew exactly what I was going to go to. But now, like, these aren't good players back then. Obviously, talk about that. But like Laurie, all NBA caliber player, most improved winner. He's really, really good. He's sitting out Walker Kessler for rest is just not fair, man. I mean, if you win a game here or there, big deal, right? Like, how far do we have to go here? So I don't know. I'm like, Utah and Charlotte's doing it now. We saw Charlotte do it with the Blazers. They did it last night against the Nets really bad. Obviously, LaMelo's really hurt, but I mean, I don't know. It's just so obvious that the NBA has all these rules and teams are circumnavigating around it. Like, we saw the Hawks with Trey getting fined, and then they still do the late scratch stuff, and they're probably not getting fined for that. They got to do better, man. Like, I can't believe that we've gone 3-4 weeks with Utah doing this, and then they haven't been fined yet. And it's apparently, I mean, they're not going to stop. Like, why would they stop? They're not going to. They're almost going to at this rate. Like, they're going to be number 2 in the lottery odds after they were playing well earlier. So, like you said, they got to do something. This has to be too much. This is way worse than the games being 2 hours and 30 minutes, whatever the case. So it's just gone too far to be this early.
People will follow incentives. And the truth of the matter is that the chances to land a Cooper Flagg or an Ace Bailey, one of these very top end players that could change the direction of your franchise substantially, are worth so much more than whatever fines that you're going to lay out to teams for these situations. They all know that. And because they all know that, you got to change the rules. The rules have to change on this. You have to have it. So imagine a scenario where everybody was just incentivized to win as many games as they could. Imagine how much better that would be for a fan base. Like, we're creating fans who are more interested in the game around asset management and transactions. And like, people wonder why the NBA is has moved to this transaction based league where there's a lot of player movement. There's all these different things. Some of that is on the players themselves. Some of that is the league facilitating those things. But we're creating a generation of people interacting with the game who are thinking about it in this way all the time, instead of just like, when I grew up as a kid, I didn't know about any of this stuff. I didn't know about tanking or anything like that. I don't know how prevalent it was back then. I knew that when I grew up as a kid in South Florida, I was a Chicago Bulls fan, but my grandfather had season tickets to the Heat. When I went to the Miami Heat games, I liked seeing Harold Miner or Brian Shaw or whoever. I wanted to see them get better. I want us to win when I went to that game. Now, imagine you go to the game and you're sitting with your dad, and your dad's like, well, actually, it's kind of better for us to lose this game because then we got a better chance at a better draft pick next year. Like, it's a bad conversation to have around the game. And I don't think it creates fans that are connected to the game especially in these teams that have struggled for a number of years. And you're saying, well, if the team has struggled for a number of years, we need to give them the leg up by having the ability to be, to picking at the top of the draft. I think it's better to build fan bases by having teams that people feel connected to because they get to see those players play all the time. Like when I grew up and I would, root for the Heat, if I couldn't go to the game live, I'd be watching the local broadcast and I'd be like, oh, I get to see my guys tonight. Now, if I was a kid and I was watching it, I'm like, Dad, where's Walker Kessler tonight?
Yeah.
Why isn't he playing? Where's Larry Markkinen tonight? Why isn't he playing? Like, that's a conversation that Dad's like, okay, well, let's watch something else. That's not good for the product. Mm-hmm. So I think the combination of overschedule and tanking is leading to a product that has a lot of people saying regular season basketball doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if you advertise that regular season basketball doesn't matter, you can't be too confused by when the ratings aren't as great as you expected them to be. So I just think the core of the problem is around scheduling and competitiveness, and the league not putting its best foot forward in terms of being able to have the most competitive games. And competitive basketball is a beautiful thing and people love it. Mm-hmm. And I just think we need to have and highlight more of it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think that part of the heavy tanking stuff is honestly because of Wembanyama. I mean, just Wembanyama is obviously a different animal. I don't know if Cooper Flags to me is good. I don't know enough about him. But the fact that you could just have that kind of franchise-chasing moment is like so valuable that you'll eat it for a season and you'll deal with the consequences.
Yep.
And to that point, like we saw the Sixers were way ahead of the curve when the odds were way better. You had a 25% chance to get the number one pick. They shifted it to 14%. Guess what? That's not enough. I think this is it. Like this is the breaking point. There was, it would be like one or two teams. We joke about the Blazers. We joke about whoever else where they like lose with 10, 12 in a row. How many teams have gone on like 8-9 game losing streaks by design?
Yeah.
So it's just too much. And then, you're talking about it. Just one more thing. It's like, your buddies, you're watching the game, whatever. Hey, do you see that game last night? We lost by 30 and our lottery odds got better by 0.10% or whatever. You're like, oh God, it's such a bad conversation.
You want to talk about where people like me have ruined sports and ruined the game? Because this is a conversation a lot of people like to have, right? People that, came from Ivy League backgrounds who get into the game, come from private equity firms and whatnot, get into the game, look at it as a math problem. You want to talk about where it's ruined the game? It's not on the edges in terms of the game looking too similar for everybody. I think you could argue that that's what gets painted the most for those things. But where it has been instead has been on, it's actually better for us to lose because we have a 2.1% increased chance of getting a better draft pick. That is where we've ruined things. Because that is just that's not building your fan base in your culture and building a culture of kind of competitiveness and toughness and winning. And that's what the league should be about. And so I think we can spend a lot of time trying to address concerns about the style of the game and the way that the game is played. I don't think those concerns are as legitimate as the attention that has been given to them. I think the concerns that are legitimate, that more attention needs to be given to, are all around competitiveness and rest. And those two things, figuring out the best way to get players on the floor for a bigger percentage of games so that fans know what they're buying a ticket for, know what they're tuning in for. I know when my personal trainer is a Knicks fan, one of the things he loves about the Knicks, he's seeing his guys. They're playing all the time. There's not really rest for his guys. So he's like, oh, we play Denver tonight. Oh, we play the Lakers over the weekend. Like, I'm excited for these games in advance because I know the guys are going to play. Not every team's like that. And I think you need to create more of that by managing the schedule and managing things around tanking a bit more.
Yep. And is this going to get worse? How bad is this going to get? Like, that's really my biggest concern. It could get really, really bad. And I was looking on the schedule, when are we going to see the next big tank game? That's how bad it is. So it's rough. All right. Nice to zoom out here. Anything else you want to add to get us out of here?
The last thing I want to say is just this all comes from a place of love the game of basketball. I actually think the players on the floor are as good as they have ever been, and the talent is as spread as it's ever been. I feel like if you told me every player from their team that is healthy, is available, is going to play on a given night, you could stack up almost any team, and I'd find something that I find really interesting about this team to watch for the future of the game. The issue, I think, is that we're just not seeing those players available enough, and I think that needs to be addressed by the NBA. And unfortunately, the toughest of those conversations is going to come with games played and money. But those are the bigger things. But if you want the game to grow, which the game has done a great job growing internationally, and that's what's funded a lot of this television boom, is kind of the international viewing of the game. But if you want to continue to grow the game, especially domestically and regionally and locally, you need these fan bases to be engaged with teams trying to win and not teams just trying to press fast forward on the season to the off season. We don't want to simulate to end. That's not good for the game. And so I love this game very much. I think that the skill and the in-game actions are as good as they've ever been. We just need to see more competitiveness on a night-to-night basis. And I think some of the rules around the league are impacting that.
Yeah, and what the Mavericks got fined so much that game against the Bulls when they sat out Jaden Hardy in the second half.
Yep.
I still don't, and that fine was like, I want to say a week later. How are they not finding? I just don't get how
Yep.
there's not more fines. That's we like finding the Trae Young thing. Like, so what? They sat Trae Young out of a freaking national TV game. He's legit been dealing with the broadcast, the press conferences. Quinn, Trae, they all say he's hurt. They don't play him on a back to back, and they fine him $100K. Like, what? And meanwhile, it's just so clear to me that they're doing this because I think that the Trae thing, like, they legit thought he wanted to sit. Like, he was injured. And these guys aren't. These guys aren't sitting. These guys aren't injured. So, all right. Promo time to get us out of here. I'll say the unofficial bets have been pretty fun. We've been adding that to the Discord, but it's been fun. So yeah, let's promo time and wrap it up.
Yeah, we're still really proud of the product we're putting forward on the premium side. If you're interested in DFS or props related stuff, you can go to establishedrun.com/NBA-subscribe for more details on our premium product offerings. Will note we have been trying to make more effort to drop in, um, you know, side spreads, totals, live bets, different things on our props product as the market has gotten more and more challenging, both in terms of the tightness of the props market with lines being more efficient and stronger, but also with books just removing lines very, very quickly. So we're doing our best to continue to add value in there. Those subscriptions on the prop side are just a weekly subscription in case it is not working for you, which I'm sure for many people it doesn't, but we're doing our best to continue to try to add value there. And in addition, we also opened up a full statistical detail projection only package that just gives you access to the projections that are released at 5 o'clock Eastern time each day. So you don't have to worry with the bets that we're trying to get out if you're not getting value from there, but you get value out of our projections. We have that separate package. So we're trying to adapt as the market goes and continues to get more and more challenging, but very proud of the work that we're putting forward. If you're interested in any of those premium products, establishedrun.com/NBA-subscribe for more details there. And if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, please consider leaving a rating and a review. And of course, if you want to check out the video version of these podcasts, you can go to Established Run NBA on YouTube for video versions of these podcasts as well.
Yep. Trade deadline next week. Be a big time. We'll see if teams could get worse and maybe not have to actually sit guys. So look forward to that. Appreciate you guys. Catch you guys next time.